Well, hey everybody, I'm John Ritlin with a retro review of the WCW Nitro episode from November 15th, 1999. The infamous Pinata on a Pole match and a few other things are the reason I wanted to do this one because that was pretty goddamn tasteless, but I'll get to that here in a bit. This is also the go-home show for WCW Mayhem 1999, and we're just a few weeks in, just over a month into the whole Russo-Ferrara era in WCW. I want to make mention that the ratings did uptick a little bit. If you study the history, the ratings did tick up a little bit. Attendance was also sliding down. Attendance had been sliding down before they even got there, though, so I don't even want to blame them for that. Also, the Time Warner merger with AOL was going to be happening pretty soon. In fact, it was going to start in January 2000, so it's a couple months after this, and then take a year to complete. The people in charge of that didn't want WCW, no matter who was in charge, no matter how much money it made or anything, so nobody was going to save WCW. That being said, this creative was shit. It was absolute goddamn shit. They had 8 people left in a 32-person tournament. I say person because Medusa was actually involved in the first couple rounds. And instead of kicking off with that and saying, hey, we're going to kick off with a tournament match, and then we're going to hype that throughout the entire night. Nope. You know what they start off with? Heenan and Schiavone on commentary. Great. That's great stuff. But you start off with Jimmy Hart dressed up like a knight in a suit of armor against Norman Smiley in, shoulder pads and everything, and football gear in a hardcore match. Norman Smiley's going to take a Brian Knobbs at the pay-per-view, and I know Jimmy Hart and Brian Knobbs was part of Jimmy Hart's first family, and so was Hugh Morris. There were there were probably going to be other people involved in that thing and everything. It was going to be a rotating cast of whatever, but instead of kicking off with something hot, a tournament match or anything, nope, they kick off with this. And I love Jimmy Hart. He's one of my favorite managers of all time. He's top 3 easily. But this was absolute shit. And Jimmy Hart's an entertainer. He's great at entertaining. Norman Smiley's an incredible wrestler. This was bad. This was completely horrible. It was too much comedy, too much ridiculously. And if this is how they're going to compete with Raw, how they were going to compete with Raw, no wonder Nitro kept losing. And kept losing soundly. Resoundingly losing all the goddamn time. It was fucking atrocious. We ended with the table spot where Jimmy Hart goes through a table in the suit of armor. Norman Smiley wins. Brian Knobbs beats him up. It's a bunch of bullshit. It's a bunch of goddamn bullshit. And then the announcers finally start talking about the tournament. The tournament, to crown a new world champion. After the events of Halloween Havoc, where the world title got held up and everything and all this. And, oh, good God. The show, unfortunately, only got worse. We then get more talking. We get a lot of talking while the crew clears out all the plunder, if you will. Lots of backstage stuff with Henning. Henning has to fight Goldberg and earn a new contract by beating him. We get the Nitro girls. I always preferred Spice. I always liked Spice. And then the red-haired Spice, Nitro girl, whoever she was, I don't remember her name, kicked the shit out of Spice. They were trying to get the Nitro girls involved in matches, which wasn't a great idea, mainly because they were bad storylines, not for lack of trying on the girls' part. Nash is then dressed as Sid with Scott Hall, has a weird face mask. Nash was in the midst of a retirement where he had lost a retirement match to Hulk Hogan at Road Wild 99. And was still appearing on TV and stuff like that, but just not in an active role. And they're making fun of Sid, making fun of how he's a hillbilly, he doesn't make any sense, this kind of stuff. And so Sid's going to get down there, he's going to come out on the stage, he is going to run them down and prove that he's smart. How does he start with that? He says, you're only half the man that I am, and I have half the brain that you do. I didn't realize that this was the episode that this happened because I purged some, of the WCW timeline for the last couple of years out of my goddamn head. This was objectively hilarious. Now, I love Sid. I admit that Sid ain't perfect, and some of the shit that he said really controversial, and he really should learn to keep it out of his goddamn mouth and actually grow up and realize things have changed. But that being said, as far as a character, an on-screen character, and even in the ring, I love Sid. This just proves how Sid was never all that good at the promos. He was insane, and you believed what he was saying, even if you didn't understand what he was saying. But it's like, again, you're only half the man that I am, and I have half the brain that you do. And the crowd was laughing. The crowd was too busy laughing. The crowd had checked out by this point. They had totally fucking checked out. They popped for some of the wrestlers, some of their favorites. They popped for a couple things. Mostly it was just them trying to get themselves over. I bet you at least 50% of this crowd was papered. If it wasn't, I'd be amazed. And, oh boy, then we get, I think he challenged him to a match later, because we do have a match in the end. We had 15 matches on this show. 15 matches on a 3-hour show. Now, I know I pick on Raw, sometimes current Raw, for having 7, 8 matches, and sometimes it doesn't seem enough to fill a show. 15 matches is way too much. You got to find a balance. 10 is about good. No, not Ty Dillinger. And then we get a Booker T interview with Mike Tenay and this kind of stuff, and he talks about how midnight will strike sooner than you think. And he's talking about facing Creative Control, the two Nazi Harris brothers. We then get a Randy Savage Slim Jim commercial where he's in an asylum. I forgot that Randy Savage was still part of WCW by this point. I think his contract ran out just after this, because his last pay-per-view appearance was against Dennis Rodman at Road Wild 99. The great career of Randy Savage ended in WCW against Dennis Rodman. And you wonder why I feel bad for the fact that Randy Savage was never brought back into WWE Hall of Fame until after he died. Fucking bullshit. He'll bring back Warrior, but he wouldn't bring back Randy Savage. I don't know what the exact reasoning is for Randy Savage never being brought back, but that always fucking bothered me. So, that being said, the powers that be, aka Russo, off camera. Russo off camera, even then, was annoying as fuck. He should have not been on camera ever. I'm not going to claim to be the smartest person in the world. I'm just a wrestling fan. But even observing, I can tell that Russo, being this whole powers that be thing, he's sitting at a table in a room that didn't look like it had been furnished since, World War II. So you had, Creative Control there, and Kimberly is there. And Kimberly, DDP's wife at the time, I think they got divorced soon after, but he's going to make Kimberly wrestle. He's going to wrestle, and she's going to wrestle Asia. Asia, Asya, like China. Do you get it? Do you get it? And she'd been around for a while anyway. That wasn't a Russo creation. That was an idiotic creation by whoever came up with it. But then we get Booker T versus Creative Control. We get two guys with Nazi tattoos beating up a black guy. Geez, there's no weird implications here with this bullshit. I hate the Harris brothers, by the way. They were terrible as the Blues Brothers, or Blue Brothers. Probably would have been terrible as Blues Brothers also, because I can't imagine they had any skills as far as like being able to make people laugh except at them. And then when they were DOA, that gimmick was DOA. And then they were Creative Control, and then the Harris brothers, and a whole bunch of bullshit and everything. And why were these guys pushed? Fucking hell. They were two suit-wearing guys, bald guys. They were supposed to be like agents from the Matrix. Except even the computer-generated versions actually seem more lifelike than these dumb fucks. And it was a mess, and they beat him. They beat him with like some double-team maneuver and this kind of stuff. And then suddenly, lights go out. Weird noises. What the hell's going on? And suddenly this statuesque woman, black woman, shows up and beats the shit out of Creative Control. So Midnight lays them out. And then we get Brian Knobbs and Jimmy Hart and Jerry Flynn and somebody backstage. I don't know if it was the Barbarian or who it was. The camera wasn't very focused. I think it was the Barbarian. Jerry Flynn, as far as I don't know why he was ever featured. And it's not that he wasn't a legit athlete. It's just his matches weren't very interesting. So yeah, we get that. Then we get Creative Control being yelled at backstage. They got beat up by a woman. And how Russo even brings up, Jacob and Eli Blue or DOA, that whole thing was over. Gee, I think that was a creation by Russo. So Russo knocking his own creations, admitting that he doesn't know fuck all about wrestling or care fuck all about wrestling. So we then get Evan Courageous versus Johnny Boone, I believe, and he was a ref. This was based on something last week, and it was a whole bunch of ridiculousness. And why was a ref getting beat up? Oh, and Medusa was here with Evan Courageous and on commentary. Medusa, who was taller than Evan Courageous, which I find kind of hilarious. Not necessarily for Medusa, because Medusa's a statuesque woman that, probably also should be somebody to maybe keep some words out of her mouth and get a little bit of clarity on how she views some things. But as a wrestling character, she was legit. And had been retired for a couple years, since like Bash at the Beach 97, but was still around under contract. And then won the Cruiserweight Championship soon after this. WCW was a goddamn mess at this point, and unfortunately it would only get worse in 2000. Oh boy, David Arquette winning the championship in 2000. I want to make mention of this really, really quick. I don't blame David Arquette for that. I may have a scathing rant about that and just the whole idea of it in April of next year, but I digress. Evan Courageous wins when Medusa uses her womanly charm, shoves Johnny Boone's face into her chest, and then pulls his shirt over his head, and Evan Courageous beats him. And there's no rhyme or reason to any of this bullshit. And funniest thing is, Medusa beat Evan Courageous in the tournament, and then they hooked up, and then they broke up later, and then Medusa was all upset and had left the company, I think, by January or February of 2000. Not that you fucking blame her. So, Powers B are putting the Luchadors in a piñata on a pole match because Mexicans love piñatas. It's pretty much what this was. So now we get, and forgive me, by the way, if I get one of these wrong. I think El Dandy was the other one. They never announced them, but it was Juvi, Villano 4, I believe, or Villano 5, Psychosis, Silver King, and El Dandy, piñata on a pole match. And then you had Ed Ferrara. You had a backstage segment where you actually had Ed Ferrara and Dr. Death Steve Williams walking to the ring. Ed Ferrara was the Oklahoma character. If you don't know what the Oklahoma character was, it was making fun of JR's Bell's palsy, his real life conditions, his real life bouts with Bell palsy that have affected him for years and years and years and years and years, and still affect him to this day. It's a terrible disease. It's a terrible thing that's affected members of my family. There are certain things that, there are many things I joke about. There are certain things I won't joke about. This is one thing I'm not going to joke about. I will say that JR's commentary has slid downhill in the past 10 years. I will say that I know JR is not everybody's cup of tea, and I can totally respect why people do not necessarily care for his commentary. There's a fine line, though. Ed Ferrara, the worthless, fat, motherfucking piece of shit that he is, that should have been slapped by every wrestler and every goddamn fan in that arena and around the world for what he did to JR, for what he made fun of JR for. Like, look, you can say if you didn't like the guy on commentary, that's fine. I don't know what the backstage stuff was, and I don't know if JR treated Ed Ferrara that well. Ed Ferrara didn't deserve to be treated that well because guess what? Clearly, he just wanted to hold a goddamn grudge and make fun of somebody, and whoever came up with this, and it was Russo that came up with this, should have been slapped. That being said, one thing I want to point out, and I heard a clip, I don't remember what the episode was. I believe it was from JR's podcast. That Vince Russo did apologize years later for what he did, for what he wrote, and he felt guilty about what he had done to mock JR. If that is true, and if Russo's genuine, and I very rarely believe that Russo has much of a genuine bone in his body, I'm going to take him at his word for that. JR seemed to. So I'm going to let Russo off the hook for that. That being said, Ed Ferrara deserved every bit of ridicule. He deserved to be slapped. He deserved to be spit on by people and not do anything and let it slide down his face because he's a little freaking pansy that wouldn't know what to do in a goddamn fight. He's a piece of shit. Never belonged in wrestling. And I really, really hope that... I really wish that he had never gotten involved in wrestling. You know why? Because Ed Ferrara was a joke. And the only way he could get over is by making fun of somebody that had a real life condition. And there are fine lines. There are ways to get over and get heat and this kind of stuff. But Ed Ferrara was, at best, he was under, David Crockett as a commentator. And David Crockett wasn't all that good as a commentator, but at least he had passion for it. What did Ed Ferrara have? He had the ability to make fun of somebody with a real life condition because he had no goddamn talent of his own. Ed Ferrara is a piece of shit. And I really, really hope and pray that Ed Ferrara never has anything like that happen to anybody in his family. Because then how's he going to feel if somebody makes fun of them? Now, yeah, I joke about a lot of shit. I will joke about a lot of shit in the future. I do not care if people want to get upset at my jokes because there's a fine line between jokes and being mean-spirited. And that was mean-spirited. It was a goddamn personal attack. I fucking hate it. And I can't imagine too many goddamn people did love it either. Because even commentary, like Shivani was laughing it off, Heenan was laughing it off. I can't imagine they were that goddamn comfortable. I mean, I would ask Shivani, but I don't really want to make him uncomfortable. But I wonder if he's ever addressed this on his podcast. Because I would like to actually hear what he had to say. It was a joke. It was a fucking joke. By the way, as for the match was shit. The match was shit. It was a whole racist thing, making fun of Mexicans, piñatas, all that bullshit, and everything. And guess what happened? There was a DQ in a pole match because Dr. Death Steve Williams attacked. When were there DQs in pole matches? Even going back to the 50s and 60s and that kind of stuff and whatever. And 70s. Were there ever DQs in pole matches? Somebody let me know. Because I don't recall it. Whatever. I don't know. Ow. My head hurts. I need to calm down. Oh boy, we get Goldberg and Nash interviews and stuff like that. And Nash's retirement lasted all of 3 months. Continuity. Hooray. Goldberg gets an interview talking about how he's going to face Curt Henning. We then get Goldberg and Henning brawling backstage where Goldberg makes his entrance. Henning shoves the door, closed on him. Goldberg no-sells it. They brawl backstage. And then they get in there and the match starts in the ring. And then Well, Henning is supposed to. If Henning gets pinned, then he's no longer he cannot get a contract or whatever. But if he beats Goldberg, then he gets a new contract or something. And I say that because there was a cross leg lock, the leg lock that Goldberg does, and Henning taps out. But because Henning tapped out and didn't get pinned, he can still keep his job. I don't think anybody knew what was going on. I don't think the commentary team knew what was going on. Oh, and then Henning got hit with a spear and a jackhammer. And then we get Jim Duggan, confronting Kimberly in a room because Kimberly's getting all scared. Because, by the way, Kimberly was in the midst of getting stalked by David Flair at this point because that was the only good thing they ever did with David Flair was turn him into a freaking psycho because he couldn't wrestle. So he might as well do some character work. And he actually played the character pretty goddamn well. But Duggan says, wait, I'm going to go fix these fuses because Jim Duggan was a goddamn janitor at this point. That's what they were using Jim Duggan as. And he became TV champion by finding the TV championship Scott Hall had dumped in a trash bin. No, really. And then Creative Control, they want Tori. They're confronting the Filthy Animals. They say, yeah, we'll get Tori. We'll get this kind of stuff. And they, flip him off. And it's all ridiculous. Duggan gets a fuse from Chavo Guerrero. Chavo Guerrero, who is dressed in a suit and is trying to hawk some items to get some money. He was trying to do that earlier with Booker T before Booker T went out for his match. Nobody knows what the hell is going on at this point. You could have watched every single Nitro episode, every single Thunder episode in succession, kept up with this live. I guarantee you half the fans would have not been able to keep up with it because nobody could because it was just schizophrenic booking. And not even like, the fun kind where it's like, okay, I can enjoy this. No, it was bullshit. We get Vampiro and the Misfits versus Berlin and the Wall. Not the Berlin Wall. That might have been more interesting. Because the Wall character certainly wasn't interesting, and neither was Berlin. It was Alex Wright, by the way. They'd already given up on this gimmick. Wall choke slams on the Misfits. Wall and Berlin argue for a bit, and then the Wall ends up pinning Vampiro for 3. And then a chain gets used on Vampiro. Because a chain match at the pay-per-view. Good God, this is terrible. Tori with Russo and Creative Control, and Russo basically says, hey, you're only here to look good, get out there in a bikini and referee the match. No, seriously, that's what he basically said. Russo objectifying women. He's never done that. Except he has. Rick Steiner versus Sid Vicious. And they brawl into the crowd and everything. This was actually pretty good. And Rick Steiner and Sid Vicious, you wouldn't think that would work. They were just teaming up a few months before, but fuck continuity. They're fighting and brawling and everything. And sadly, this is one of the better things on the goddamn show. A lot of the shit that featured Sid was some of the best stuff on the show. The first segment, mostly for comedy. And then they brawl and everything. And they brawl onto the stage. And then a powerbomb by Rick Steiner puts Sid puts Rick Steiner through a goddamn, breakable floor. It would have been impressive to see Rick Steiner powerbomb Sid, actually. But then Steiner gets stretchered out. Sadly, again, probably the best thing. Now, I don't know if some of these matches ever officially started, but, oh boy. By this point, we're on match number 7. I'm just going to call this an official match. If it never started, whatever, it doesn't matter. Then we get... Sid then says, well, the night has just begun because he's going to face Kevin Nash a little bit later. We have not gotten to any of the tournament matches, and we're nearly 2 hours into the show. Jerry Flynn versus the Barbarian in a brawl backstage. The Block, I think, is what it's called. It's almost in a boiler room area. And they fight near a parking garage area and this kind of stuff. And I don't know what this was. It was bullshit. I know that much. And I hated it. I absolutely objectively hated it. It was trash. We then get Asia versus Kimberly and Tori as the ref. Tori and Asia brawl for a bit. Sadly, I think Tori was a better worker of the two. Tori wanted to actually get better in the ring. And it's a real shame they didn't allow her to do that. This is what they were doing with women's matches in WCW. Not that they were doing much better in WWE. If you saw my SmackDown review, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. If you didn't, if I don't put the link up here, check out the video timeline. But then, yeah, so Kidman and Eddie take her away, covering her up and everything and this kind of stuff because she's in a bikini, a ref bikini, a striped bikini, and that kind of stuff because objectifying is fun, apparently. And then David Flair comes down in a referee shirt, stalking Kimberly with a crowbar. Not with the wrestler crowbar. I would have been more interested to see him carry the wrestler crowbar as a weapon. But it is what it is. Asia then lays him out, and then David Flair lays her out with a suplex. Almost suplexing her onto the crowbar. Good job there, David. And then he gets beat up, and it was bad. It was so fucking bad. We then get Shane Douglas. I think it's Shane Douglas there, and Shane Douglas gets laid out. But then Asia lays out David. Did anybody know what was going on by this point? Sting is in a room somewhere and gets a bouquet of flowers from Lex Luger trying to make a peace offering. And Sting says, no, you tell Lex I'll see him later. He hands the guy money, so at least he paid him, so that's good. Good guy Sting. Sting, by the way, who was a heel just a couple months before. It's a bad idea to turn him heel. Fuck, my head hurts with all this. Luger is like, he doesn't know what to do. His shirt was not too tight, Billy, and if you've seen the GIF, you know what I'm talking about. Luger and Liz, what do we do? And Luger's like, to Liz, well, you're my manager. That's why I pay you the big bucks. That's why you beat her also, Lex, didn't you, you dumb son of a bitch? You should be burned in hell for that. Hopefully you will one day. Woman beating, steroid-using pile of shit. Never deserved the spots that he got in wrestling, and he beat Liz. Not going to say Liz was perfect, but for fuck's sake, that was brutal. Anyway, we get Chris Benoit versus Scott Hall with Kevin Nash, and Bret Hart joins Benoit at ringside, and it's a quarterfinal match in the tournament. We are finally at the quarterfinal match in the tournament. The rest of the matches, well, except the main event, are all quarterfinal matches. This is match number 10. We are nearly 2 hours into the show. Thankfully, Nitro will go back to a 2-hour format after the end of 99, because a 2-hour format actually is much more digestible on Mondays. If only that was the case now. So, Hall was done soon after this. I think Hall was done by Super Brawl 2000. It was to the point where it's like he couldn't do anything anymore. He was out of shape. His demons had taken over. Seems like he's cleared up with them now, but still not the best guy, but at least he cleared up his demons. And, oh boy, so it was fine. It was fine. I mean, it was Benoit basically having to carry Scott Hall because Scott couldn't really do anything. Sid comes down while there's a big old schmoz on the floor and the referee's distracted. Sid powerbombs Hall. Diving headbutt. Well, Benoit doesn't get the cover. Soon after, Hall goes for some brass knucks. And crippled crossface taps out. And then, yeah, we get that. So we get Benoit advancing. And then we get a Buff Bagwell interview. He's buff, he's the stuff, and he's going to face off against Jeff Jarrett. And I've had enough. I'm going to continue to review this because I'm almost done, thankfully. Kidman versus Bret Hart, Filthy Animals at ringside. Ray on commentary. Nash and Hall bother Tori, Eddie, and Conan get out there, are out there, and they start to attack Hall and Nash. That doesn't work so well. And the sharpshooter taps Kidman pretty soon after this. And then Nash and Hall beat up the Filthy Animals while Bret Hart gets out of the ring and says, well, my duty's done. I'm out of here. Why wasn't Bret Hart just out there for his match? Why didn't they just have Nash out there? Why did they send them back? Why did you make them do their entrances again? If they were going to be in a match a little bit later, I can understand it. I didn't get it. Oh, Jeff Jarrett versus Buff Bagwell quarterfinals match. Creative Control interferes. We get a guitar shot on one of the Creative Control members. We get a stroke for 3. No, not that kind, even though it seems like Creative might have suffered a bit of a stroke because something must have happened. It was not a stroke of genius, I will say that much. And Jarrett wins. He advances. He's going to face Benoit. And then Bret's going to face the winner of this next match. But Dustin runs down from the crowd, or actually runs from the crowd, gets in and lays out Creative Control and helps Buff Bagwell because we needed to push Buff Bagwell in 1999. That was a great idea. Luger and Liz, they put X-Lax in some brownies that they got from catering. And then Jim Duggan intercepts them and eats the brownies. Because he's a janitor, so he's going to have to clean up his own shit. Do you get it? Poop jokes are funny. And it's a House of Pain match. This is something that the Revolution, Shane Douglas had advertised and talked about. And it's a cage match with a top on it. And handcuffs all around the ring. And you got to handcuff every limb. So you got to handcuff them like this. And then you got to handcuff their legs so they're basically strung out. So it's like Hostile before Hostile existed. And it's Saturn and Malenko versus Eddie and Conan. And Shane Douglas on commentary screaming like he always does. And I like Shane Douglas, but he did not need to be screaming all the time and ruining commentary like he tended to when he wasn't just about putting over the match. So, it was bad. It was just bad. Both Filthy Animals got strung up. Because stringing up Mexicans to a cage, it's like Trump booked this well before, idiots elected him to office, but Anyway, I digress. Ray then gets strung up and they target his bad knee and everything because stringing up more Hispanics is a good idea and great to appeal to the Latin demographic. It's not like the pinata on a pole match. Yeah, so they don't really like the Latin wrestlers here. I think it's pretty obvious. Lex Luger with Liz versus Sting, quarterfinals match. Sting attacks early, focuses on knee. We get a ref bump. We get some mace in the eyes. And then we get Ming attacking Lex, Tongan death grip, while Lex has Sting in the torture rack. And Liz tries to mace Ming. That doesn't work. And then, yeah, Sting beats Lex, thankfully. We get Sting there against Brett. And then we get Nash Sid in a brawl, and Hall interferes. We get Goldberg spearing Hall and Nash, and then him and Sid brawl, and then Brett runs down. And I don't know what happened. I thought it was a brawl or a Street Fighter Anything Goes match, but because they brawled for a while. But if it was an Anything Goes match, why was there a DQ? Why was there a DQ? What was going on? What was this episode? It was trash. It was absolute trash. Once again, fuck the hell out of Ed Ferrara. I hope he's never allowed in wrestling again. He never deserved to be in wrestling. And he'll burn in hell for doing that and never apologizing to JR for it. And even if he did, I don't know if that's good enough. But I digress. Anyway, let me know what you guys thought in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.